Hi, it's Lloyd from Benjamin Stevens Auctions and Investments. I'm just here today with Mac, my LinkedIn guru.
My name is Mac. I am a LinkedIn networking strategist and I help you stand out of the crowd and become the go-to expert within your field on LinkedIn. Lloyd, you've been in business now for a while and in property for a while.
32 years.
You don't even look old enough to be in business for 32 years.
Yeah, 32 years.
But there's a story behind it. And you mentioned to me before about your experience at market stalls right in the beginning.
Yeah, well, my grandfather started his business in market stalls. And my uncle had half of Roman Road Market. And my father and I had a stall in Roman Road Market from very early age when I was at school, weekends. So that was the sales bug, if you like, addiction. It taught you how to talk to people, and it got you, not that I was ever a shy person, but it got you talking and got you in the buzz of the whole market vibe. I was talking to my dad yesterday about this, and he said, do you remember the hog roast rolls we used to get? They're the most amazing hog roast rolls in the East End, and they were just incredible. We used to get them all weekend. And it just, we were talking, it was memories. It's quite funny, actually. But yeah, it started me off as in the sales game. And then I did work experience for a big corporate estate agency when I was 14. And they took me on straight away at weekends.
Hold on, at 14?
14, work experience, yeah.
And doing what specifically when you were 14?
So with work experience with school, you do a 2-week placement where you basically are dog's body. So, So you fold paper, you stuff envelopes. But with me, they did that for the first few days, and then they took me out for appointments, and they took me on valuations. And then when I got to the end of it, they said, do you want a weekend job? So I did weekends there. And they used to pick me up. My boss, Eric, used to pick me up from home, take me to the office. We'd do a day's work, and then he'd drive me home again. And it taught me well. I mean, my first business card was Junior T-Boy. I think I've got it.
Actually said Junior T-Boy.
Yeah, when I was 14. It was a bit of fun, to be honest with you, for them. They used to tease me a bit in the office, but it was good fun.
But you were included in the work environment?
Yeah, absolutely.
At a very early age?
Yeah, I wasn't very good at school.
Well, this is the thing is, the standard education process doesn't fit everybody. No. And one of the things that I find is personality comes out through experience as well. And I've found that you're quite a direct person. And there's no BS.
Blunt, I think I get called quite a lot.
But the thing is, at least you know where you stand with yourself. But I can see how those days in the market stalls, because you don't have a lot of time with people.
No.
And you've got to get to the point pretty quickly, and you've got to be quite succinct. How that's kind of molded and become part of
I suppose. Probably why I like car boot sales as well.
Okay.
I like doing those apart from the early mornings. But I see your point. But it's... But yes, education with school with me, maths and English and business studies was kind of all I was interested in, which looking back, maybe it was the wrong thing, but I stand by it. I went to quite a few schools, to be honest with you. I think the first school let me go at the age of about 9, and the second school loved me so much they kept me down a couple of years. So...
So you've had
so I've had a mixed mate, but it was different in those days at school.
Yeah.
I was privileged enough to go to a private school for most of it, and I learnt more in the last year, which wasn't a private school. So it doesn't suit everybody.
Well, where you are now, and this is the things that we forget in business is once we get to a certain stage. Nobody comes and goes, hey, can I look at your report card? Or can we, tell me about primary school or tell me about your education,
I think
your
when you're like 18, 19, they want to know how many GCSEs you got and all that. But now I'm 46 years old. I can't even remember the last time I wrote a CV.
Yeah.
So I think with me, and I think I was quite privileged in that way because I only worked for 3 or 4 different companies my whole career. A lot of my friends were job hoppers. And I wasn't. I learned the corporate way of estate agency, which is the best way. But I was the corporate attitude was a bit like being back at school.
Yeah,
regimented, being told how to, like what time to do things and this. Whereas where I am now, Benjamin Stevens, Steve, the director, is the same. We worked together when we were kids at the same corporate. So we bring the same ethics to the business. In the same way as when I close my desk in the evening, it's so funny, we both do it. We lower the desk with the chair, we put it under the desk, we tidy the desk. No one can see our desks, but we still do that. And it's just the mentality.
It's a mindset.
You know, I wouldn't leave the office if phone calls were not done. You know? If someone says to me, oh, you've got a message to phone someone, I'll sit back down and make the call. Whereas I think the problem with estate agency today is they don't have that. Yeah, they rely, like when I first started, there was no computer. Well, there was a computer at the back and it was about the size of the fridge. It was ridiculous, and only one person was allowed to touch it. And we used to put blue tack with the property details in the window. But you'd hit the phones.
Yeah.
And you'd hit the phones and you'd hit the phones. And I make, still to this day, if I don't make 60, 70, 80 calls a day, I feel like I haven't done a day's work. And I say to everyone all the time, can you sell a house without the internet? Could you sell a house without Rightmove? Because when we used to have, someone mentioned it to me yesterday, a roller deck. I still have it upstairs. I love it. But in those days, you'd flick through your applicant box and you knew people and you put notes on there. And now it's all done by computer. It's different. Although Steve's trying to get me back into the IT world, I'm a bit old school. I've got pads and pens and notepads and things like that.
And one on every desk.
Absolutely, everywhere. It drives him mad. But all the notes have to go on the system, but that's because the system makes everything run smoother. But I still tease everyone in the office and say, I bet you couldn't sell that without Rightmove.
Yeah.
You know, but that's not what I do. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I saw a post by Steve a few months ago talking about that phone call process that you talk about now, and the fact that he put an application or a request in
to view a house.
Yes. And nobody got back to him for days.
I don't think anyone got back to him at all until he put a post on LinkedIn about it. Didn't mention it because we're not mentioning no disrespectful. He didn't mention the company, but they obviously saw it and knew. Called him. But I went to see some houses in Hertford 3 or 4 weeks ago with my wife. Not one agent called me to see what I thought. I got an email asking for feedback from one of the agents, which I ignored because I thought, wow.
They asked you for feedback.
Automated. It wasn't a hi Lloyd, how you doing? It was an automated. It was definitely, it was the computer system running the business.
Yeah.
Computers help run a business. They don't run a business. People run a business. So
people buy from people.
So I ignored it. I bumped into the chap in a pub in Hertford a few nights later, and he said, oh, and I said, sorry about the house, we loved it, it was too small. And he went, oh, the agent said you didn't want to look in Hertford anymore. And I went, that's total fabrication, because we are looking to move to Hertford. But the agent just made it up. Because agents' mentality is if I looked at it on the Saturday and I wanted it, I'd call at 9 o'clock Monday morning. Because I didn't call, I didn't want it.
Yeah.
Which I get, because it kind of makes sense. But that's the problem with the industry.
So this brings me to the kind of, not necessarily, well, the ethics and the values of the team that you work with, because most of the team have been there for quite some time.
Michael and I used to work together with Steve in the same company. So we've known each other 20 years, 25 years. Nathan's been with the company, I'm going to get told off, but I might be wrong, 6 or 7 years, 7, 8. Michael's been there 15, 16 years. The company's 21 years old. It started from a service office and now it's got 2 massive branches. So yeah, there's hundreds of years worth of experience there. And it's very amazing. But we're very different people.
Yeah.
Michael, I call him like a silent assassin because he's very, very quiet, and he's not the one he rings a bell when he does a deal. But then at the end of the week, he'll be like, I've done 5 deals this week, and I'm like, wow. Yeah. Nathan's the younger guy, so he brings the slickness to the industry, and I'm just the guy that runs around because with the auction world, my business isn't made in the office.
Yeah.
I call it like an admin day. I did an office a day yesterday and they were teasing me saying, oh, blimey, Lloyd's in. But they don't realise if I'm not in the office, I'm seeing people like yourself, I'm seeing builders, lawyers, accountants, and wooing them for business.
Yeah.
Because my job is networking, to be honest with you. I do a lot of networking.
So, I mean, from everything we've covered so far, there are a few things that stand out, because when it comes to just dealing with people in business, because there's this know, like, and trust factor that people look for. And when you look at the organization, you've got longevity, you've got people that have been, relationships are pretty much key. There's a lot of discipline in the sense of the work ethic, but also the customer focus. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing on a regular basis come through. Because things like making that number of phone calls, as an example, and not leaving the office with some clients hanging on, waiting to be heard from. And that changes, that's a massive difference compared to a lot of the mindsets in business today. Why do you think, what sets you guys apart? What makes you...
If you asked 100 house sellers why they're pissed off with their estate agent, it will be contact. Lack of contact. If you haven't sold a house and you just pick up the phone and own the conversation, that's what Benjamin Stevens would do. And that's fine. Yeah? Because we can't sell every house in a week. But if you speak to the client all the time, text, WhatsApp, phone calls, emails, contact, communication, then it's fine. But I know lots of people who, there's a house around the corner that's been on the market nearly a year and a half.
Wow.
And I know these people, and I don't do business around here. I don't do business where I live. And I bump into them in the pub or the shop, and I'll say, you're still on the market? And yeah, we're third agent now. And I'll be like, it's not the agent, it's your price. And they're like, well, I can say it because I'm not working for them. I said, look, you're 200 grand overpriced. You're delusional with your price. And that's where other people fail a little bit as well. But contact and communication is everything. If you haven't spoken to your client for 5, 6, 7 days, it then becomes a stage where it's been too long and you're nervous to make the call. And then all of a sudden it's 2 weeks. And then you're like, oh shit, I've got to phone that client, I haven't spoken to them for 2 weeks. You know they're going to tell you off. And then you don't call them at all, and then you get disinstructed.
Yeah.
And that's probably why we keep a lot of our stock.
Well,
because we're not like that. But my auction stuff, it sells so quickly that I don't have that kind of job. Because I saw a house, a chap came to see me last week, he's in some financial difficulty, that was Friday. My lawyer Nick had the legal pack drawn up by Monday 10:30. I had a buyer in place Tuesday to exchange. It hasn't exchanged because there's legal work going on with his financial difficulties, but the fact of the matter is, I had the guy ready from Friday to Tuesday ready to exchange, so there's no vendor care for me. I just get the job done. And that's different because you don't get that friendship, partnership of the client, but there's buyers that I've dealt with for 20 years. Yeah. I know I can make a phone call to an investor, developer, landlord and say, I've got this, this and this, and get it done. So that's where my relationships are. My relationships are with solicitors and accountants and things like that. So it's kind of different. And I'm quite lucky because that's lunches and beers and coffees and chats like this. It's kind of more relaxed.
It's interesting because what you've gone through now, for the average estate agent or somebody considering getting into the business, just in the last 5 minutes, they would have learned a lot of things that they probably don't see on a day-to-day basis in most estate agents.
Yeah, I think people don't realise how hard estate agents work,
to
be honest with you. One of the things that got me into auctions is the time it takes to sell a house in the UK. And I'm 46, been doing it since I was 14. When I was 14, it took 12 weeks. And we charged 2.5%. Now it's taking 6, 9, 12 months. And agents are scrubbing around with 1%. We're not a 1% agent. We don't need to be. We don't want to be. But there is 1% agents. And so they're paying 1%. They're taking 6 to 9 months instead of 12 weeks. And then right at the last minute, it falls apart. You get paid nothing. So people don't realise that. If you look at I watch a lot of junk TV estate agent programs, $1 million listing, this one, that one. They're all charging 3, 4, 5%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're making millions, and they're driving around in Bentleys. These kids, because they're charging that. Why is the UK not charging proper fees for the industry? I met a chap yesterday or the day before. He said, "Oh, I'm struggling for listings. I'm going out 0.5%." I said, "You're disrespecting the industry." I said, "It's just ridiculous because you're not going to get twice the amount of business. So you're going to be a busy fool because you're going to be running around
just doing more
for less."
Yeah.
And he argued with me, and I guarantee you he will, because none of the other estate agents will respect it. And the public, he'll never get. He said he was just going to do it for a month. You'll never get over that. Once you've done it, drop your pants if you like. You'll never find,
because everybody will ask for that again.
You'll never get the feedback. And I warned him and I told him, but we charge, as an auction company, I charge 2%. One of my competitors charges nearly 5%, you know. But they'll say, "Oh, we don't charge the client. You don't pay a fee," because they charge the buyer. And I struggle to understand what person thinks they're not paying the fee if the buyer is paying nearly 5%.
Yeah.
Because the fee's the fee. Whoever pays it,
Yeah.
pays it. And a client says to me, "Oh, I'm not paying any fees." And I'm like, "You are, because the buyer's going to reduce his offer by nearly 5%. It's huge." But the company's hugely successful, 4.8. And I don't want to be a 4.8, 5% agent. We're happy with 2%. We like to do business to make profit, but we also don't want to skin people alive because it's just unnecessary.
Well, one of the things that I find in business is it's, prices, if you're selling on price, you're running at a loss most of the time because of the fact that you are competing with everybody else based on price and not the outcome and the service. Because as you say, when you're negotiating on price, somebody's going to pay those fees anyway. But the key thing is the experience people go through so that they are happy at the end getting what they want. So, when we talk about auctions, as an example, a lot of people are going through different situations when it comes to considering auctions. You must have had some interesting stories with regards to why people consider auctions.
Yeah, absolutely. Different things. I had one guy came to me a few months ago. He put a deposit down. He put 100 grand down on a chalet in France. He's retiring. He wants to move to France, and he had 12 months to complete on this chalet in France. So he had his house on the market. Agent overvalued it to get the instruction. I think it was in Wales somewhere. So then they didn't sell it 3 months. They changed agents, reduced it a little bit, changed agents, reduced it. Then they got a buyer. Then the buyer pulled out, couldn't get the mortgage. Then he's now 10 and a half months in, and he's going to lose his 100 grand. So he came to me and he said, "Look, I've been in this house for 40 years. So, we reduced it 20%. That's kind of circa auction money. 20%, 25% reduction is where you need to be at." And he said, "Can you sell it in a week?" I went, "In a week?" Yeah, I sold it in 8 days. Yeah, because I found an investor who was willing to take a 20% reduction, rent it out for 2 years, and then sell it for market value and make a profit. Because he understood everyone's got to make a profit. Everyone's got to get paid. There's got to be meat on the bone. There's other people, landlords. Landlords are finding it hard at the moment. There's a lot of changes in the lettings industry, which I'm not even going to pretend to understand because I'm not in lettings.
Yeah.
I don't need to know these things. All I know is landlords are scratching their heads at the moment. And they're coming to me and they're saying, "We want to sell the property, but they don't want to pay the mortgage for 3, 6, 9, 12 months while the tenant's not there. And I can sell the property to an investor landlord with a tenant in there because my landlords will look at the yield. And if the landlords own the property 10, 15 years, they can take a little chip to get it sold quickly."
Yeah.
And I do that a lot. I've got one situation at the moment where the tenant's 6 months in arrears, they're not paying the rent. So he's had to take an even bigger drop. But I found a landlord that will take it on because they're in the process of eviction. So the landlord's probably thinking, "I won't have any rent for another 3 or 4 months." But he's taken that into his equation.
Yeah.
The auction buyer buys with a calculator. not with an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the client, the seller, they want their money quickly. Yeah. So everyone wants money quickly for different reasons. You can be in final distress. You can be the guy moving to his chalet in France. You can be. One guy said to me the other day, he's got a massive investment opportunity. So he's selling 2 of his buy-to-lets because he can take that money, even with the 20% reduction, and he's putting it into this business opportunity, and it will make him more. So that's another person. But I meet different people all the time.
So a lot of it, when it comes to auction, comes down to a need for urgency.
Yeah.
So, the things that come to mind to me, and having worked with different businesses and seeing people trying to get as much as they can out of a situation, whether it be a business deal or anything else, and not realizing, it's like when people start a business and they don't realize what it takes to run a business and all the additional things that come along with it. And the same with buying or selling a property. That additional time, like you were just talking about that example of 9-10 months on the market.
Yeah, I mean that's quite
3
common
agents
now.
in. That time and frustration for that individual having to have lost 10 months worth of progress, their own personal time, the going to sites, the speaking to the agents, the being disappointed.
They have to value what the money is worth to them.
Yeah.
But also very importantly is sometimes the figures go higher than reserve. When you're in the room, people are bidding.
Yeah.
If it's got something special about this property, if it's got planning permission or if it's got extension development, if it's got possibilities, we can blow these figures out of the water and you can end up getting more than you did through the agent anyway.
Yeah.
Because when you guide something low and cheap and you're bidding over, you get hundreds of people in the room. And that's the difference.
So that's a part that people don't really talk about with regards to auctions, the fact that just because it's on auction doesn't mean you're going to get less.
No, you guide it less.
Yeah.
Because I would say to people, do you want an open day with 3 people or do you want an open day with 23 people? Because if I fill the room up with buyers, every buyer is selling the property to each other. Every buyer is thinking, cool, that was really busy.
Yeah.
When you go to an auction today, you're not bidding in a room like the old days. You're online. There's a few that go in the room, but generally it's online. And they can see the bids going up and going up. And I can see how many people are in the room. And it's incredible because you can have sometimes 5 or 6 or 7 people bidding. I'll set a reserve of whatever, 250 and it's going 260, 262, 263. And you can go up. And because they're seeing an angle. But if you put it on the market, on the open market, instead of 250, you put it on for 300, you might have only got 1 or 2 people. And then they would have offered you 270 lower. It's much more fun this way.
So the whole auction process, does the person selling the house have to be at the auction for the process?
No. I prefer to show a house that's empty.
Yeah.
Or a property that's empty or with a tenant. Because if you're selling through an auction, you need to have money quickly. There could be emotion from the seller's side.
Yeah.
And I think the buyers are more relaxed if there's no one in the house.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I've looked at houses and the owner's there, you have to pretend to like it when you don't. But with auctions, it's different because a lot of them are in bad state or they're not singing and dancing and clean and beautiful. So it's different. You don't have to pretend. I mean, I sold a house up the A41 that was horrendous, and we found a carcass of a rat in the cellar. It was terrible. Actually, I put a social media thing about it. But the owner of that property wouldn't want to be in that house, because it's just been left to rot, and they didn't want to be there. But the buyers loved it. And there was 23, 24 people when I opened the doors for that house. And what I heard was couples saying positive things about it, and everyone was listening and earwigging. And then before you know it, the guy's saying to his wife, "Did you hear what they said about the garden? What they do?" So they're all selling it to each other, and then the price went up and up and up and up and up. So it's quite interesting. So the answer is no, that they don't need to be there. They actually don't need to do anything. Yeah. Once I met you and we've agreed terms and prices, I can take a key, and if you don't want to, I'll never have to see you again. I mean, it's not how I work anyway, because I like to have a beer with a client or a drink or a coffee when it goes through, because I like to have that friendliness side. But the seller does nothing. The lawyer does a legal pack. I do the viewings. We do the exchange. The money goes to the lawyers, and the lawyers then get involved and do the completion. It's as simple as that. So it's quite painless for the seller. Whereas I suppose if you go on the open market and you've been on the market 3 or 4 or 5 months, you're doing a lot of the viewings yourself maybe. But some agents don't do any viewings and the clients do them all, and some agents do all the viewings and clients do any. So everyone's different. Everyone runs their different businesses. When I sold my last house, I didn't do it because I found it awkward selling my own house. So the agent did the viewings. The only one time the agent phoned and said he can't make it, my wife did it. And she's not that sort of lady. So she sat in the lounge and said, just have a look round. And they're the ones that bought the house. Yeah? She literally said, just show yourself around the house. And they did it and they bought it. So that tells you that maybe that person enjoyed the fact she was just like, any questions, let me know. So everyone's got a different attitude.
So for me, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is, for somebody who's selling their property, needs to do it with some expediency and considering an auction, that emotional side of things is something that you give them an opportunity to actually have that removed so that they don't have to get emotionally involved in the process, because that could be pretty hard.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Especially the ones that are in the financial difficulty.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it 100%. I'm not, and I say the same thing to a lot of clients. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear, and sometimes I'll tell you what you don't want to hear, but I'll get it sold, and I'll get it sold quickly. So some people take offence, and then they come back to me a couple of days later. I had a client that was battling me on my figures for weeks, and I said, look, that's the figure for the auction. If you want private treaty, speak to my guys. I've got a huge private treaty office. They'll help you, but it might take a few months. He goes, but I need the money quickly. I said, but you need to understand the process. He's emotionally involved. Eventually he'll come to where we're at. But so that is quite sad to see. But then I've got landlords that have got numerous tens and 20, 30 properties that just want to get rid of a couple because they want to buy different things. So it's not that, so it's different. So as I said, all clients are different.
So one of the things that I really like about what we've gone through so far is your sense of clarity in the process, what's expected. We touched on the whole, your early days of learning sales and having to do that clear, quick, direct to the public, and how that has impacted where you are today. And one of the things that I like is the fact that you're direct. You're not. Yeah. There's no BS around that.
I'm a bit like Marmite. I can't lie. People don't get me, and you can't please everyone.
Yeah.
But I am quite blunt, because I'm not here to. I can't think of the right polite way to say it. I'm not here to schmooze you in that respect. I'm here to be nice and respectful, but I have to tell you exactly what's going to work and what isn't going to work. I've been like that my whole life, with my friends, with my family, with everybody, because it makes me laugh. My memory's terrible, and to lie and pull the wool over someone's eyes, you need a sharp memory, and I haven't got one. So I always say to people, like, tell you how it is. If it upsets you, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But the next day, 2 days later, 3 days later, if I've told you 100% the truth, I can't be caught doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I upset people occasionally. I can't lie. But on the other side, I have a lot of clients that say to me, I love your bluntness. Because I always say to when I meet a client, sometimes I'm a bit blunt. I'm not being rude, I'm not being horrible. It's just I need to get it out, what I'm saying. And they respect it, I think, most of them, to be honest with you.
Well, having been in sales for 20, 30 years now, myself, and having dealt with a lot of different styles of people in business when it comes to sales, people, we're in the technological age now where people have wisened up. They know all the tricks. And when a salesperson's trying that angle, or there's extra fluff, or, it very quickly has flags that go up and rings, alarm bells go off, and you sit there and you think, okay, what's the angle that this guy's going at? Why is he not telling me this, or why is he not telling me that? Or, like you said, like, he hasn't called me in 2 weeks. Is it because there's nothing going on? And then people start making up their own assumptions.
Absolutely.
Whereas somebody like yourself, direct, straight to the point. They know what the next step is. They know what the expectancy is, and you're not scared to communicate. I've sat in an office with you where we're sitting having a meeting, and the phone rings, and you don't let that thing ring more than 3 rings. It's like, boom, you answer it.
But that's the old school logics, being back in the old days of the estate agency, because you grab the phone, you make the deal.
But it's also the fact that you don't let people wait, because even if you're busy with something. And it's part of the thing that I really like. I know the fact that if I'm trying to get hold of you, whether I'm a client or anybody else, if you're not available, you'll either send a message or you'll just go, "Hey Mac, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back." And you put that, and I'm like, I know where I stand with a guy. Whereas with most agents, you just would never get hold of them.
Yeah, no,
they'd
I am
forget,
quite well
wouldn't
known
return the
for
call.
saying, "I'll call you back."
Yeah,
but I do call them back.
But that follow-up, that's the part that's so important. So what I'm getting at here is the experience that I've had just getting to know you over the last few weeks is you're direct, which is great. I know where I stand. I know what I'm going to get. You're going to return my call, which is vital, because,
that's the most important thing in any sales agency industry. I've done it numerous times, but you talk about the way sales in the old days. In the old days, you'd walk into a house and an estate agent, and then you'd get teased because you always had a Ford Escort company car or a Peugeot company car, and you wore a cheap suit, and you'd walk in and go, "This is a kitchen. This is a bathroom."
Like, point out the obvious.
No, it's a kitchen. That's the garden. But nowadays, when you show a house, I would just be like, have a wander around, ask any questions. I don't hard sell. My father had clothes business, or my grandfather and my father together, and I remember the ladies that worked for them, because they were like family, because I was growing up, and someone would walk into the shop and they'd go over, they'd address them, they'd help them with the sizes, the colours. Now I go into M&S and I'm just like, leave me alone. I don't want to know. But they don't do that anymore. Because if you go into M&S today, then you can't find any staff. But my father had 5 or 6 girls in each shop, because every time someone walked in, they got the one-on-one service. Doesn't happen anymore today.
No.
And that's across the board of all businesses, in my opinion. As I said, you go into a shop, generally you can't find any staff. You go into Tesco's and you're self-serving yourself. There's no customer service, because you'd never think of that. It's no different to an estate agent when you're getting a computer-generated email saying, what did you think of the house you saw yesterday? Yeah, because the guys in our office would never do that. They'd pick up the phone and they'd call the client. Yeah. And it's just the different ways. But yeah, I miss the old days of how it used to be. But the modern technology of the internet and the computer systems is incredible if you work it still with the old school ways of doing the customer service. And I think that's where a lot of people forget, to be honest.
Well, that's where I see the differentiation between what you and your team and everybody in the organization do is, yes, tech is important. Yes, you're adopting tech. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing these interviews and that kind of thing. But at the same time, you put the customer first, where you make communication vital as part of the process.
Yeah.
So, anybody considering an auction, if they're in a financial difficulty, or it's a probate situation where they're out of the country and they've got mom and dad's house that's needs to be sold, but they haven't got the time to go and put it on the market, and deal with all the other things, whatever the emotional situation is that they are facing, that has put them in a situation where they have to move fast and get that done.
Yeah.
The beauty of it here is they're going to deal with a human being that they know is going to return their call, keep them in touch as to what's happening, and hold their hand through that process. Whereas with any other organization, you might have to, submit something, wait a week, send loads of emails, and there's no face to the person that's dealing with it. And this makes such a big difference, though.
Yeah, customer service. It all goes back to customer service.
Yeah.
Every question that we've had in the last 10, 15 minutes, to me, all goes back to the same thing, customer service.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about different companies. Customer service is knowing where your customers are, who they are. When someone phones and they tells me their name, I don't need to say which property is that.
Yeah.
I know, because I don't have hundreds of properties. Yeah? If I had hundreds of properties, I couldn't give them that love and care and service, but I don't. I concentrate on giving a selected people. But I know, I was on an appointment the other day and I'm going up against a huge corporate. Huge corporate. And they're saying, well, they're a huge corporate. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm not. Yeah?
That's the beauty.
And I thought I was losing it. And he's like, well, how about you reducing your fees? I said, well, I'm already cheaper than them. And he goes, but they're a huge corporate. So I said, okay, and I played a little game. I said, call that office, tell them your name, and ask them where your property is. He said, what do you mean? I said, put it on loudspeaker, and if we can hear them tapping on a computer, they've lost. So they did it, and they said, what's the postcode? She said, no, I'm asking you what my post. And we had a laugh about it. I said, now call our office. And they called the office, they said their name, and the lady picked up the phone and said, is Lloyd not with you? Because they knew where we were and they knew the client. And then the client said, okay, she laughed. And I said, one more thing. On Sunday, give them a call, last chance, give them a call and give them the instruction. So she said, and then she called me on Sunday, she's laughing. I said, why? She goes, they're closed. I said, I'm not. And that was the same thing. Because we work differently. Yeah, I'm not sat in an office from 9 till 6. We're working like 8 till 10, 11. And I work Saturdays and I work Sundays and I always pick up the phone, like you said. And if I'm meeting, I'll say, I'll call you back. But I always do. And again, it goes back to customer service. Yeah, clients know that past 8, 9 o'clock, they'll send me a text and they'll say, can you talk? And I'll say, yeah, no problem. And I'll pause the TV and I'll go in the kitchen and I'll make a phone call. But that's what puts me different. Yeah? And I say that to everyone. If you want the human touch, then cool. But still the corporate state, they're so successful. Yeah? If I can take 2% off each of them, then we've got a thriving business.
Yeah.
But we've got a thriving business with customer care. And that's the most important thing.
Well, I keep saying, but a lot of people watching this won't know that this is an option, because over the last 5-10 years, customer experience has gone in a totally different. The bigger the organization, the less chance you're actually going to get the ability to speak to a human being.
Absolutely. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention names. Have you ever tried to phone BT lately? It's amazing.
Yeah.
I tried to phone a hospital last week to book an appointment. I was on hold for nearly an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the hospital. So it's different.
Well, it is massively different. But this is such an important part as well when it comes to, these decisions. This isn't something that it's a throwaway conversation. These are life-changing, conversations and experiences with most people, because it might be a inheritance property, or it might be, needing to make, as you say, a better deal somewhere else, but I need to move these properties on fast.
Absolutely.
So I can access this cash. So these are big decisions.
But we do with a lot of probates as well, and that's where we get the emotional side as well. So, but again, some people are quite callous with the probates. Some people are like, get it done, get it done, get it done. And some people are like, because what I say to anyone with probates is what we like to do is kind of like a USP. we'll never sell a probate pre-auction because we want to go in the room because we want to get the best physical price we can get for the client. And I know a lot of people that when they say the word probate think they can nick a property, but it's not about that. It's about the family have been left a building, a flat, a bit of land, to the kids, to the grandchildren. So we want to get the most money we can for the client. And to get the most money, you've got to go in the room.
Yeah.
Some people, because they're not desperately needing the money, because they didn't have it yesterday.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have the money yesterday, you haven't lost anything. Yeah. If you had £1 million in the bank and then you lost it, then you've got to sell it quickly. If it's a probate, and there's the emotion again, that's when things are different. And a lot of people and a lot of solicitors like that. So they'll say, look, go to speak to Lloyd, he's got his ethics in the right way. I had a meeting yesterday with a lawyer who's got a client with 4 properties. And I actually turned around to the client and said, why don't you keep 1 or 2, sell the other 1 or 2? He says, well, no one else has told me that. And I'm like, yeah, but you can, he said, what about the tax? I said, but when you sell these 1 or 2, you can pay enough tax to the government and keep those 2. So that's what he's going to do. And he phoned me later and he was like, that's really nice because I could have taken all 4. And I said to him, look, keep those 2. That's your inheritance. That's your pension kind of thing. And sell those 2. So I had the right advice. As Steve always says, it's not about doing the deal. It's about giving the right advice to the client to do the deal. Yeah? We had a situation where we thought we could get more money for a property. So the client was saying yes and I was saying no. Yeah? I said, hold your nerve. It's a great expression that an ex-boss taught me actually, hold your nerve. And I'll never forget when he said that, hold your nerve. And I said to the client, hold your nerve. And 2 days later, we got him an extra 20 grand. You know? So everything is different, but it's all about trust.
Yeah.
Which goes back to customer care again. So it's very, very similar. But it's a great industry. I wish I'd got into auctions 20 years ago, to be honest with you, because it's the speed of like doing a rental deal, but with better fees.
Well, there's so many other things that are involved, but the fact that you can do it so quickly, because you've had things turn around in days.
Yeah.
Where when you look at a lot of property process, because of all the legalities and depending on somebody else having to sell, and there's so many different moving parts, it can literally take months, as you said, an example of 18 months for somebody. But that knowing that this is something that I can get sorted within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and somebody who knows what they're doing is at the helm, but they're going to communicate with me and be direct and tell me what I need to know, not what I want to hear.
Absolutely, but I mean, we need a legal pack, an auction legal pack.
Yep.
That's how I sell properties quickly. And I found this guy on LinkedIn, funnily enough. Nick, he's a great lawyer, and he can sell me, I can get you a legal pack in a couple of hours. And that's how he works. I've got another lady who's selling a property who's been waiting 3 weeks for the legal pack. So it's different because, again, it's the lawyer. Don't choose a cheap lawyer.
Yeah.
Choose a good lawyer. And that's the important thing. But with normal agency, private treaty, call it what you like, you do a deal and then you start the legal work. And that's why it takes time, because there's no urgency. But when you say auction legal pack, the lawyer knows it's an urgency. Again, you use the word urgency.
Yeah.
So it's quite important. But yeah, when I bought my first flat, it took 10 weeks. When we bought this house, it took 5.5 months, because it was a chain of 4.
Yeah.
And for 5.5 months, I'm like this. Yeah? Because for 5.5 months, every time the agent phones you, you think the deal's dead, because you think someone's pulled out, and you're shielding it from your family, and you're trying to take the pressure. The pressure's enormous, because up until the day of exchange, there's the pressure. And even the day of completion, it was like 4 o'clock. I was like, where's the damn keys? Where's the phone call? And the pressure, because you've got the vans out there, and it's that. But with auctions, you don't get that, because it's just done.
Sure. Lloyd, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for the conversation, but also the blatant honesty, the very casual way of communicating. And those people that are watching, considering auctions, I would 100% recommend that they just, for you, pick up the phone.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
They can really get to the bottom of things very quickly.
Even if they just want to understand a bit more about it. Yeah, I don't sell everyone's property that I meet, but I talk to them and I give them advice, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.